The sun had barely crested the rolling hills of rural Pinecrest County when bus number 14 rounded the curve onto Willow Creek Road. At 7:15 a.m., its bright yellow frame glowed against dew-damp grass as 20 chattering students climbed aboard, backpacks slung over small shoulders. Harold Nguyen, a calm veteran driver with 2 decades behind the wheel, performed his routine safety checks. Mirrors aligned, brake lights illuminated, doors locked, while his co-chaperone, Ms. Rivera, greeted each child by name and reminded them to fasten their seatbelts. The gravel road, flanked by pastures and stands of loblolly pines, wound through a patchwork of farmland. Wildflowers, bluebonnets, Indian paintbrushes painted the roadside with splashes of color. At the 1.2-mile mark, a sprawling fire ant mound dominated a sunlit clearing. Some years back, entomologist Dr. Mia Santos had identified this as one of the region's largest Solenopsis invicta colonies, thousands of workers traversing well-worn foraging trails at dawn. As bus number 14 approached, Harold eased his foot off the accelerator, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. The children craned their necks to spot the anthill through the bus's panoramic windshield. 3 eager third-graders at the front windows, Liam, Zoe, and Marcus, pointed excitedly. "Look at all those ants!" Zoe exclaimed, cupping her hands around her voice. Ms. Rivera peered out behind the driver's seat. "Remember our lesson on ecosystems," she whispered. "Those ants keep the soil healthy by aerating it and decomposing organic matter." Harold nodded, smiling at their curiosity. As the bus slowed to 5 miles per hour, the white stripes of the painted crosswalk near the adjacent elementary school came into view, their faded lines a reminder of the day's first stop. But today was no ordinary morning. The air held a faint vibration, imperceptible to the untrained ear, but felt as a subtle tremor underfoot. At the edge of the clearing, the fire ant foragers, already busy hauling insect prey and nectar, halted mid-trail. Their antennae quivered in perfect unison, and a wave of synchronized back-and-forth antennation rippled across the mound's surface like a living shiver. Harold glanced over his right shoulder. "Did you all feel that?" he asked the chattering children. They fell silent, confused by the sudden stillness. Zoe pressed her forehead against the glass. "The ants. They stopped moving," she observed in a hushed voice. Across the aisle, Marcus pointed. "They're all doing that thing we learned, where they tap their feet and wave their feelers." Unseen by the bus's occupants, the ants' quake-sensitive legs were detecting the earliest whispers of subterranean soil collapse, a hidden sinkhole forming beneath the roadway. And thus, at the very moment bus number 14 slowed to a crawl near the ant mound, nature's smallest engineers delivered an urgent and unspoken warning. Pay attention. Danger lies ahead. As the bus rolled to a near stop beside the towering fire ant mound, the morning serenade of gravel under tires and children's chatter abruptly hushed. Through the windshield, Harold Nguyen noted an unusual stillness in the ants' foraging trails. Dozens of linear columns of red bodies stood motionless, their legs thrust outward in rigid poses. The rhythmic hum of their activity had been steady since dawn. Now it was as if the entire colony had frozen in time. Inside bus number 14, Zoe tightened her grip on the seatback, and Liam pressed his palm flat against the glass. "They look like they're dancing?" he whispered. From her perch behind Harold, Ms. Rivera leaned forward, squinting at the mound. "That's antenation," she murmured to the students, recalling her nature study lesson. "When ants touch antennae, it's how they communicate. But this is different. They're all doing it at once." The synchronized antenation rippled across the anthill's surface like concentric waves, a living barometer reacting to something beyond sight. Beneath the road's gravel, the ants' specialized mechanoreceptors had detected micro-vibrations, soil losing cohesion as subterranean limestone dissolved into hidden voids. These minute tremors, too subtle for seismic gauges, registered sharply in the ants' legs, triggering the colony-wide vibration alarm. Harold's brow furrowed. He glanced at his dashboard, speed still at 0 miles per hour, engine idling, seatbelt indicator steady. The road ahead was straight, with no visible cracks or dips. Yet the ant's unified freeze and ritualistic foot tapping told a different story. He tapped the brake monitor. All systems normal. Still, instinct urged him to pay heed to these tiny sentinels. "Everyone stay seated," Harold announced, turning to Ms. Rivera. "Keep an eye on that mound." She nodded, voice calm but firm. The children watched, captivated, as the ant columns quivered in unison, antennae touching neighbors, then back, sending signals hive-wide that danger lurked below. Moments later, the ant columns parted, the workers retreating in orderly back-and-forth oscillations, forming a boundary zone of roughly 12 meters along the road's edge. This ant-demarcated segment corresponded precisely to where the ground's solidity had begun to fail. Unseen to the humans, a pocket of sandy soil was collapsing into a cavernous sinkhole beneath, its rim creeping closer to the surface with every passing minute. Harold exhaled slowly, digesting the silent alarm. "Ms. Rivera," he said low enough that only she could hear, "we're going to mark that stretch and keep the bus here until someone checks it out." She nodded, unlatching her door. "I'll set up cones and warn incoming traffic," she replied, gathering reflective triangles from the storage compartment. As she stepped onto the gravel shoulder, the synchronized ant columns swayed back and forth one last time, an emphatic tremor, before dispersing into safe zones around the mound. The unspoken warning had been delivered. The road was no longer secure. Thanks to the fire ant's uncanny sensitivity, bus number 14 and its precious cargo of children would pause here, moments before calamity struck. As Harold and Ms. Rivera set out fluorescent cones and safety triangles, the synchronized tremor rippling through the fire ant mound drew their full attention. Even from 10 meters away, the ants' behavior was unmistakable. Foragers halted mid-stride, then lifted their bodies on extended legs, rapidly waving their antennae in precise back-and-forth pulses. This vibration alarm, once documented only in laboratory bioassays, was now on full display in the field. Back on the bus, Harold keyed the school's GPS unit at the start and endpoints of the disturbed trail segment. North 34 degrees, 21.468 minutes. West 96 degrees, 47.212 minutes. To north 34 degrees, 21.472 minutes. West 96 degrees, 47.205 minutes. A straight line distance of 12.4 meters. He relayed these waypoints via his radio to the county's road maintenance division. Ant colony marking a danger zone, 12 meters long, centered at mile 1.2 of Willow Creek Road. Meanwhile, Ms. Rivera pulled out her phone and live-streamed video of the ants' collective freeze and antennal waves to the school's emergency group chat, urging parents and administrators to stand by for updates. Within minutes, Dr. Mia Santos, on her way to a soil sampling station 2 miles north, received Harold's alert on her handheld tablet. She immediately recognized the classic vibration alarm pattern. Repetitive antonation at roughly 0.5-second intervals, broadcast across thousands of workers in unison. In published studies, such synchronized antennal waving corresponded to detection of subsurface disturbances, underground cavities, termite tunneling, or in this case, voids created by subterranean limestone dissolution. Dr. Santos overlaid the GPS coordinates onto her digital map of the county's karst regions and triangular survey grids. The ant-demarcated segment lay directly above a known limestone aquifer, where historical groundwater pumping had lowered the water table. She tapped into the county's geophysical database and confirmed a record of micro-subsidence events logged at this exact location over the past decade, none of which had produced visible road damage until now. Equipped with both biological and geological data, Dr. Santos called Harold on his radio. "Your ants have just outsensed our instruments. There's a developing sinkhole directly beneath where you marked the mound. I'm dispatching an ultrasound ground-penetrating radar team right away. Keep the road closed until they arrive. And well done. Those ants just saved a school bus." As the first wave of geotechnical crews accelerated down the county lane, the fire ants resumed normal foraging, their alarm subsiding as the immediate threat passed. But bus number 14 remained safely parked, its passengers none the wiser that a colony of tiny guardians had sounded the world's most precise warning. moments before the road collapsed into a yawning sinkhole. While Ms. Rivera secured the final safety triangle, Dr. Mia Santos arrived in her all-terrain SUV, flanked by two geotechnical technicians carrying a ground-penetrating radar (GPR) unit. The county road crew had already roped off the ant-indicated segment, and yellow caution tape fluttered across Willow Creek Road's western shoulder. Dr. Santos knelt by the first marker, GPSN 34 degrees, 21.468 minutes, west 96 degrees, 47.212 minutes, and calibrated the GPR's antenna to a 400 megahertz frequency, ideal for revealing subsurface anomalies down to 3 meters. She swept the antenna slowly along the road, watching the live readout. The radargram displayed alternating bands of reflectance corresponding to asphalt, gravel, and soil layers. At the center of the ant-demarcated zone, a distinct hyperbolic reflection appeared, indicative of a void, spanning a 2-meter width and beginning approximately 0.5 meters below the surface. She logged the second marker, GPS North, 34 degrees, 21.472 minutes, west 96 degrees, 47.205 degrees, and performed a parallel sweep. The void signature persisted across the entire 12.4-meter stretch, with the deepest point reflecting at 1.2 meters depth, where the limestone bedrock had begun to erode. Overlaying the radar data onto her tablet's GIS interface, Dr. Santos traced the sinkhole's outline, an elongated chamber beneath the pavement, now at high risk of collapse under vehicular weight. Meanwhile, two technicians measured the road's surface deflection under controlled load tests using a 2-ton roller. At the ant-indicated center, the deflection gauge registered 3 millimeters of give, double the safe threshold of 1.5 millimeters. Beyond the markers, readings fell back to 0.5 millimeters, confirming the void's localized nature. Dr. Santos radioed County Engineer Tom Beckett. "We have a confirmed subsurface cavity, length 12.4 meters, width 2 meters, depth up to 1.2 meters. Immediate road closure and full excavation required." Tom arrived moments later, nodding grimly as he surveyed the radar plot and deflection data. "Good work. You ants gave us precise coordinates. No need for trial and error digs." As the crew mobilized heavy excavators to remove the compromised pavement, the fire ant colony resumed normal activity, their alarm trails replaced by bustling forager lines once the threat had been mapped. Thanks to the ants' synchronized warning and the swift geotechnical response, the hidden sinkhole had been precisely charted and contained, saving Bus 14's passengers and ensuring Willow Creek Road could be repaired before the morning's second school run. By 8:05 a.m., with the GPR confirming a cavernous void beneath the roadway, County Engineer Tom Beckett initiated emergency protocols. He keyed his radio. "All units, commence evacuation procedures. Bus number 14 to be rerouted off the main road immediately." Harold and Nguyen, still parked safely behind the warning cones, guided the children to disembark in pairs, their small feet crunching on gravel. Ms. Rivera led them down the hillside path, hand over hand on the safety rope strung between trees. Each child clutched a buddy's hand, moving with practiced calm from weekly safety drills. At the road's entrance, flaggers in high-visibility vests directed incoming school buses and personal vehicles onto Old Mill Lane, a detour mapped out by Tom's team. A flashing arrow sign, deployed by the highway crew, guided traffic around the compromised segment. Meanwhile, 2 large excavators arrived, their buckets poised to breach the pavement ahead of the void. At Tom's signal, operators removed the first 1 meter of asphalt at the eastern marker. The ground beneath shuddered. A hollow thud resonated as the bucket's teeth broke the overhang of collapsed soil. Behind them, the children watched from a safe distance as the road's surface cracked and sagged. At 8:12 a.m., the central segment, where the ants had sounded their alarm full 10 minutes earlier, caved in with a rumbling roar. A trench 4 meters long and 1.5 meters deep yawned where the bus had stood moments before. Not a single person was harmed. Harold ushered the last child onto a waiting school van, and the students cheered upon seeing their familiar bus driver safe and smiling. "All thanks to you, Ms. Rivera, and those ants," one child called, pointing back at the ant mound, now crawling with peaceful workers. Dr. Santos knelt at the trench's edge, her tablet displaying the echo of the ant's vibration alarm, aligned perfectly with the collapse zone. She tapped a final note into her report. Sinkhole collapse confirmed at ant indicative segment. No casualties. As the heavy machinery cleared debris, the detour remained in place for repairs. The synchronized march of thousands of tiny ant sentinels had granted the human rescue team over 10 minutes of critical warning, enough time to evacuate all 20 children and their chaperones from imminent danger. In the hush that followed the collapse, the ants resumed their foraging, unaware that their collective alarm had once again saved lives on Willow Creek Road. By 8:30 a.m., the Sinkhole Trench, now a yawning cavity 4 meters long, 1.5 meters deep, and 2 meters wide, had been fully exposed. County Engineer Tom Beckett surveyed the collapse zone from the trench edge, hard hat in hand. Soil layers were clearly visible. A 30-centimeter layer of compacted gravel, over 20 centimeters of sandy loam, underlain by a void where limestone cavitation had removed bedrock support. Tom ordered the first step: installation of trench shoring. Crews lowered pre-cut steel H-beams into the sides of the void at 1-meter intervals and slid cross-bracing plates between them, creating a rigid frame to prevent sidewall collapse. Hydraulic jacks locked the braces in place, stabilizing the trench for safe work. Next, operators of a backhoe began pumping controlled fills of flowable fill, a cementitious grout mix with a slump of 200 millimeters, into the void at its deepest point. As the grout filled the cavity, small plumes of fine sediment welled up through fissures in the trench floor, confirming the fill's reach into all voided spaces. A laser level mounted on a tripod tracked the grout's rise, signaling when the infill matched the roadbed elevation. Once the cavity was completely grouted, taking 45 minutes, crews topped the trench with a 20-centimeter layer of crushed stone, compacting it with a vibrating plate compactor to 98% of Proctor density, as verified by a nuclear density gauge. Finally, a 30-centimeter asphalt overlay restored the road's surface, matching the existing pavement thickness and ensuring a seamless transition for passing vehicles. Throughout the repair, the fire ant colony returned to normal activity. Foragers reestablished their trails across the newly paved segment, their synchronized march resuming as though acknowledging the road's renewed safety. Dr. Mia Santos knelt at the mound, observing the first ants to cross the repair site. They paused briefly and tenanted the pavement surface, then continued their orderly procession, nature's living verdict that the ground was once again stable. By 10:15 a.m., the repair was certified complete. Tom Beckett removed the final caution cone and radioed the all clear to the school district and county maintenance dispatch. Within minutes, bus number 14 returned, this time safely traversing the once treacherous segment without so much as a bump. In the days that followed, Willow Creek Road's repair held firm under the weight of school buses, delivery trucks, and morning commuters. The synchronized ant alarm and the swift geotechnical response it triggered had not only saved lives, but also provided a blueprint for integrating biological sentinels into infrastructure safety. As the road settled back into routine use, the tiny fire ants scuttled across the pavement, guardians of a highway reborn from the ground up. By late morning, the fresh layer of asphalt on Willow Creek Road gleamed in the autumn sun, its surface flawless and firm under the wheels of passing vehicles. Dr. Mia Santos stood quietly beside the fire ant mound that had first sounded the alarm, watching as hundreds of tiny red workers resumed their orderly march across the pavement as though affirming the road's renewed safety. Around her, County Engineer Tom Beckett and bus driver Harold Nguyen gathered to witness the moment when nature and human ingenuity had joined forces to protect a community. Mia recalled how at first light the ants had halted their foraging in perfect unison, their antennae waving in rhythmic pulses that no human instrument could match. She remembered mapping their freeze zone, marking the precise 12-meter stretch where the collapse was imminent, and then confirming the underground void with her ground-penetrating radar team. As the trench caved in just minutes later, she felt a surge of gratitude for the ants that had sensed the danger, for the engineers who had acted swiftly, and for the children who had watched safely from the detour. Now, standing beneath a sky streaked with gold and amber, Mia unveiled the Fire Ant Alarm Network, her voice carrying over the hum of morning traffic. She described how solar-powered cameras and seismic sensors would be installed at key anthill sites, programmed to recognize that distinctive three-beat tremor followed by two final pulses. When the colony froze and antennal waves rippled across their mound, roadside signs would flash warnings, and traffic management systems would automatically reroute vehicles and alert emergency crews. Schools and community centers would teach residents to read the ants' behavior, empowering them to report any unusual freezing patterns. As the team walked back onto the pavement, Harold turned and gently touched the anthill's crest, his eyes soft with emotion. "Those ants saved my kids," he said, voice thick with gratitude. Ms. Rivera, the bus chaperone, smiled through tears, her mind replaying that tense morning as the children safely disembarked down the hillside path. In that calm hour, Willow Creek Road had become more than a strip of asphalt. It had become a living partnership between humankind and the smallest guardians of the land. And as vehicles glided past the mound, scattering tiny shadows in the late daylight, everyone understood that sometimes the most powerful warnings come not from beeping alarms or flashing lights, but from the restless, unspoken vigilance of a colony whose instinctive watch had written a new chapter in community safety.